Welcome to the screencast for solving proportions. In this screencast, you're going to learn how to solve simple proportions. In order to get a good understanding of solving proportions, it's important that you know how to solve 1- and 2-step equations, and we'll be using the solving proportions lesson as we start to get into some complex proportions. So we would describe these proportions in this screencast more of a simple proportion, and then in the next screencast we'll be talking about just like a generic or random proportion that you'll come across. So let's take a look at this first example. And our first example is just when we're going to be looking at something with a variable in the numerator. And this is just basically a one-step equation. Right now, what are we doing to the variable? We're dividing by 9. How do we undo that? We're going to multiply by 9. So let's just get some room to work. And again, what am I going to do to isolate the variable? Well, if I'm dividing by 9 to undo that, I multiply by 9. And what you do to the right-hand side, you do to the left-hand side. So I will use my calculator, or I will just understand how fractions work. I'm going to take that 5 times 9, which is 45. So that's going to be 45 over 8 equals n. And just in general, we're used to seeing the variable on the left. So I'll just finish up my answer. N equals 45 divided by 8, 45/8. Now, when we start to look at another type of example where we have the variable in the denominator, we need to be very, very careful with our variable in the denominator. We're going to learn as time goes on in math in general that our denominator is very special, and there's a lot of rules about the denominator. So one way that we can handle this is as soon as you see a variable in denominator, you know that's got to go. So I'm just going to get some room to work, and because my variable's in the denominator, what I'm going to do is just multiply both sides by a. Multiply both sides by whatever's in that denominator. And when I do that, we know that a divided by a would be 1. That goes away. So I'm going to be left with 8 on my left-hand side. And that's the whole thing. You want to get rid of that variable in the denominator. So what we do to the left, we're going to do to the right. So since on my left-hand side, I'm multiplying by a, on the right-hand side, I also have to multiply by a. So on my left-hand side, when I simplify, that's going to be 8. And then on my right-hand side, I'm just going to get, when we write it the way that we would normally see it, would be 2/9 a. Now, if you have a calculator, scientific calculator that, that can handle working with fractions, that's okay. But I'm going to rely on the old standby. I'm not going to divide both sides by 2/9. Instead, what I'm going to do is multiply by the reciprocal. So to isolate that a, I need to get rid of that 2/9. And the way that I'm going to choose to do it is to multiply by 9/2, because 9 over 9 is 1, 2 over 2 is 1, that disappears. So that's going to be my goal. I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of 2/9, and what you do to the right-hand side, you have to do to the left-hand side, so that means I'm multiplying both sides by 9/2. Then when we simplify, again, I can use a calculator, or I can say, 9 times 8 is 72, 72 divided by 2 is 36, and then, like we said, excuse me, 9/2 times 2/9 is a. And again, I'm just going to rewrite it so that my variable is on the left. So a equals 36. So the key thing here to remember is that when you are approached with a fraction with a variable in the denominator, or a proportion with a variable in the denominator, your first job is to get rid of that variable in the denominator. And we're going to learn, again, in more advanced math classes, why we want to avoid that. So in this lesson, you should have learned how to solve simple proportions, and that is our screencast.